Okay, just thought I'd touch base and talk a little bit about the reading assignment for this week, week 5. We're talking about judicial review. You're actually reading a couple of Supreme Court decisions from the early 19th century. So read the chapter introduction. The first document is from the Federalist Papers. I believe that's Federalist 78. Hamilton offering a defense of the independence of the judiciary and essentially stating that it's the duty of the judiciary, because it's neutral, because it's non-political, to be the final arbiter of what makes laws and statutes constitutional. That's what judicial review is. Then you'll read your first court case decision from the Supreme Court. This is one of the most famous Supreme Court decisions handed down. Came down from the Marshall Court. John Marshall, Chief Justice, wrote the opinion. It establishes the principle of judicial review, and it's been the law of the land ever since. It's important as you read court cases to pinpoint what the case is about. So, for instance, who has a complaint and who are they making that complaint against? Try and pick that out in this case. And what's the jurisdiction of the court? And that's really what becomes at issue in this case, is the court looks at itself and says, do we actually have jurisdiction to hear this case? Without jurisdiction, the court will not hear a case. So see what happens here, because there's a complaint. A complaint is against somebody. A complaint is brought, and the court agrees, yes, this is a valid complaint. Yes, this plaintiff is entitled to relief, but we don't have jurisdiction. And then they go on to say why they don't have jurisdiction, and then see how that becomes the basis for the development from this case of the principle of judicial review. Then you're going to read another case was handed down by the Supreme Court that really helps. It answers a key question about federalism and the relationship between the states and the federal government. It's very important in that sense because it establishes what the states can and can't do vis-a-vis the federal government. Whereas, the Constitution itself, especially in the Bill of Rights, has a lot to do with what the federal government can not do vis-a-vis the people and the states. So again, pay close attention there to what the principle at issue is, what the complaint is, and how it's resolved. And then read something by it's a message from Andrew Jackson accompanying his veto of the Second National Bank, and his reasoning behind the veto. And you'll see he's making a strong argument for all branches of the government to have an ability to determine or to make to assess legislation as either constitutional or unconstitutional. So in other words, his argument here is that it's not just up to the Supreme Court to find whether or not something is a violation of the Constitution. It's also up to the president to do so. It's also up to the legislative branch to do so. That's departmental theory, that each members of each branch or department of government, that being their specialty, have the best perspective on constitutionality over things that affect them in their department. You'll read an academic article, an essay defending judicial review, and also looking at Marshall's motives in writing Marbury the way he did. I think that's the most important part of this article, is to see how well his argument works, that Marshall was yes, Marbury is important, but in the context, it was more about Marshall trying to create a stronger judiciary, give it some actual constitutional powers, because the Constitution itself didn't give the court a whole lot of power. So Marshall's looking for a way to sort of chip away and find a spot where the Supreme Court can exercise actual power. And then, I'm sorry to say, but you can see these have been crossed out. The University of Missouri Kansas City Law School has a real great collection of constitutional documents and answering constitutional questions. And I had a great link to look at some of the basis of judicial review in the Constitution and outside the Constitution, and for some reason this link is no longer working. So I'm trying to track it down. If I'm able to find a new link to this material, I'll definitely post it because it's great material. In the meantime, I found an alternate. This is the National Paralegal School, and it's good. It's got a lot of good information for you. And it does have a breakdown of Marbury. I think the best thing it has is it has a list of some of the most groundbreaking decisions ever handed down by the United States Supreme Court. Brown v. Board of Education, which led to the end of segregation in public schools. Gideon Wainwright, which affects your right to an attorney even if you can't afford one on your own. Loving versus Virginia, which ruled that laws against mixed racial marriages were unconstitutional. Anyways, all of these are super important. You see Citizens United is also there, and it's a nice breakdown of court cases in which judicial review was invoked as a principle. So sorry that the original stuff's not there for you, but this is another good resource for you, and hopefully you'll learn a lot about judicial review this week. See you in lecture.